Hello and welcome back. This is the week 4 lecture. So our main focus this week is to choose research topics. I mentioned this at the end of last week's lecture. I would like everybody to have a topic selected by the end of this week. Now remember, we are just choosing topics. We don't have our entire arguments worked out yet. We have plenty of time to do that. We start by picking a topic that is interesting to us, something that we might already know a little bit about, something that we might have some experience with, but really all you need is an interest. You don't have to know a whole lot about it, but you need to be interested in it. It helps if you think it's important, if it's meaningful to you, so you can maintain some interest throughout the semester as we continue to work with these. And like I said, the argument will come later. We choose topics this week, and then next week we start conducting research. And once you've done research, you've read more, you've learned more, you'll be able to arrive at an argument of your own, maybe in a month, maybe 2 months, it depends. But there's no big rush. So topics come first. And the main thing I want to do here in lecture is just kind of walk you guys through some basic brainstorming exercises. Just some easy ways to start generating ideas, start writing things down, and start narrowing down the potential topics that you might want to consider. Now, if you look in the week 4 module in Canvas, you'll notice that I've posted a list of sample topics. If you guys want to look at some examples of the kinds of topics that other students have written about, topics that I've seen, topics that have been pretty common in my classes, but please keep in mind that you are not required to choose any of the topics that are listed in that document. Those are just there if you need them. If you want to look at examples, or if you're just stumped and you're having a tough time coming up with something on your own. But I would really prefer you guys to come up with topics on your own by doing some of the brainstorming exercises that we're going to do today. I just think it works better when you come to a topic sort of organically and based on genuine interest and a sort of genuine desire to learn more about it, do more with it. That usually works well for a long-term assignment like these research papers will be. So we'll get to all of that stuff in a moment, but I wanted to start today by just talking a little bit about AI. A conversation that we sort of have to have pretty much in every English class, I think, nowadays, because these tools are so readily available online. You guys don't need me to tell you that. We're all using AI to various degrees, and I think we have to sort of acknowledge that. I tried to do this a little bit in my 101 class back in the fall. Some of you might remember. Doesn't mean that we're going to use AI all the time, but I do want to acknowledge that we can use it sometimes, and we can use it whether it's ChatGPT or some other service that you use online. We can utilize this stuff to help us. We can make good use of it without letting it do all of our work for us. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today, finding a little bit of a middle ground. I'm not telling you that you can never use AI at all under any circumstances, but obviously when it comes to writing assignments, I would like the writing, the language to still be yours. So that's kind of where we draw the line. You can get answers from AI. You can get clarification from AI. You can acquire more information through AI. But when it comes to writing our weekly assignments, or, the bigger assignments that will come soon, I still want you guys doing that yourself. So I just wanted to establish some of these parameters in case we were a little bit unclear. I do have an AI policy or statement in my syllabus. It's contained in the plagiarism section or the academic honesty section where I talk about my plagiarism policy. I've added a couple of sentences about AI recently. I really only started doing that very recently because this is kind of a recent phenomenon, as you guys know. So I sort of consider getting AI to write your paper to be an updated version of plagiarizing. Once again, just like with traditional plagiarizing, if you're turning in an AI generated prompt, you're using other sources, online sources, without citing them, without giving them credit, which is exactly what plagiarism is. That's how we define plagiarism traditionally, is using other people's ideas or using other people's words without citing them properly. That's what plagiarism has meant for a long time. It still does, but we do have to update it a little bit to accommodate AI. But I want you guys to think for a moment about what you're getting if you simply turn in an AI-generated prompt. And I'm not saying many of us are trying to do this, but it might cross our minds. Perhaps we have done some other writing assignments with the assistance of AI. And again, there's some ways to use these services, effectively. But if you're just turning in something that was completely generated by a large language model, you are lifting other people's ideas and maybe even other people's words without knowing it. Because think about what artificial intelligence is doing, like the limits of AI as we know it right now. It can do a lot of things. It's capable of doing a lot of things that individual people cannot do. So we are aware of that, but we should also be aware of one of the key limitations, which is, at least right now, it might change, but right now, AI cannot really be original. AI cannot be as specifically detailed as we often like to be in English class, and perhaps most importantly, AI responses are never going to be very personalized. They're never going to be unique to you. They're never going to be unique to any one individual because by definition, these AI responses are kind of generic. They're pretty broad and they're kind of formulaic. And those aren't always bad things. They have some benefits, but they're not sufficient when it comes to student writing. So you have to think about how AI generates these responses or generates answers. It's not generating anything new. It's not generating anything original. Instead, it's sort of taking a survey of all the stuff that's already been done on a given topic. It's sort of collecting or summarizing a lot of previous work. A whole lot of previous writing, previous research, what previous people have said and done and written about whatever the topic is. And they're sort of aggregating all of that. They're collecting all of that, right? The AI service, and then it's providing it in a sort of streamlined, summarized, succinct format that's very easy to use. And we like that. It's accessible, it's easy to understand, it gives us a good broad overview of whatever topic we're exploring. But just think about the nature of what it's doing. If it's collecting stuff that's already been done, collecting work that already exists online, and again, it's doing this much faster than a person could. It's gathering all of these previous sources, synthesizing them, and then sort of spitting out a broad summary of them. And that's pretty impressive, but it's not original. It's only giving us stuff that's already been done. Now, in some cases, that's good stuff to know. That's stuff that's going to help us as we continue to learn and arrive at our own arguments about the topics. But if we're just exclusively relying on AI responses, we are never going to have anything original. We're never going to have anything that's really personalized to us, unique to us. So if everybody, you can imagine what would happen if everybody simply regurgitates AI-generated responses. Everybody's answers, everybody's writing will be largely the same, because you're all sort of working with the same summaries of the same information that's already existed online. So we're going to lose individuality, we're going to lose the ability to make original arguments, and we're going to end up repeating a lot of stuff that's already been said, already been done. But because we haven't done a lot of the research ourselves, we're just relying on this AI model, we're not citing any of it, right? We're taking older ideas, previously mentioned statements, research that's already been done, and we're maybe talking about it in summary form, but we're not giving credit to the people who did that work, the people who wrote that stuff, who did that research, who carved out these ideas. So that's just not adequate for the type of work that we're doing in here. In other contexts, maybe in the workplace, maybe in other classes, maybe if you just want to find an answer to something during your free time, AI is fine, right? AI can do a lot for you, but it's not a substitute for writing your own stuff, largely because originality matters. In this class, originality matters when we're coming up with our own arguments. We have to do that ourselves. So like I said, I'm not going to tell you guys don't use AI ever. I'm just going to tell you don't really use it when it comes time to write something of your own, especially when we start coming up with our own arguments, our own claims, and our own evidence. That stuff will originate sometimes in other sources, other places. You're going to see a lot of it through research, but you're going to cite it. You're going to talk about the authors. You're going to respond to the authors. And then you're going to build on top of what they've done your own work. So that's the process that we're going through. And AI might sometimes seem like an attractive shortcut, but it doesn't really work. And also, even for the type of work that we've been doing so far, reading potential sources, answering questions about them, trying to understand what they say, what they mean, and why they matter, that's also personalized work. If I'm asking you what you think the thesis of a particular text is, I really need your answer. If you're just asking that question of an AI service and getting a response that you then essentially turn in, A, it's going to sound like a lot of other people. B, it might not accurately capture what you really think and how you really experience the text. And C, it just doesn't really lead you anywhere. Your explanation of the thesis might not be wrong because you're basically just regurgitating what a bunch of other people have already said, and they're more or less right. But in the pursuit of being right, you've lost your own voice. You've lost your own original perspective. You're just saying what everybody else said. And that doesn't really get you very far when it comes to the type of work that we want to end up with in this class. But like I was saying before, there are some good uses of AI that you should definitely keep in mind. Things that you do before tackling a writing assignment. Things that you can do when you're trying to understand something that you've read, but not the same as replacing your own writing. But some things that you can do, should do with AI, like I was saying, find answers to individual questions. If you don't know what something is, if you don't know who a person is, or what a concept might mean, you might be able to get some of those answers that will clarify things for you and help answer some questions that you might have had while reading. So that's valuable. You can jot some of that stuff down in your notes. Now you know. Now you can proceed with a little bit more knowledge. Also, the general overview of a topic. AI is good at that. It is good at the general summary, the general overview. But you guys have probably noticed, just yourselves, that a lot of AI responses lack specific detail. Because again, these are general overviews made for anyone. They are not specialized. They are not personalized. They are not super detailed. They are just there to give that general impression, and anybody can use them, which is good as long as we keep in mind the limitations. Gives us a general sense. It's a good way to get started, but at some point we have to dig deeper and get more detail. So yeah, it can clarify things, it can get the ball rolling, it can answer questions, and it's just a good tool for acquiring new information. And that's definitely something that we will want to do throughout the semester. And sometimes you might even have some info that you want to reshape, reconfigure into some writing of your own. And that's okay. That's often what we do through research. We find a good article, there's lots of statistical evidence, lots of good testimonials, lots of good examples that we want to use. But we're not going to quote all of that, right? We're not going to quote every good thing that the author of the article says. We might quote some of it, but a lot of it has to get translated into our own language. And what that really means is writing our own sentences, choosing our own words, and building our own structure. And that takes work. Right? Even if a lot of these ideas are coming from sources, coming from AI responses, that's okay. That's often how a lot of this will work, but you can't just give those people's work and pass it off as your work. At some point, there has to be a transformation. There has to be a transfer. You have to move from the words, the language, the structure of these other authors, these other authorities, these other people, these other voices who have already weighed in. You have to turn their language into your language. You have to make it your own. You can't just copy it. You can't just change a word or two and hope that's good enough, because you're really not doing much original work at that point. You're just taking other people's work, cutting and pasting it, changing a few words and saying, here it is. And again, that kind of runs afoul of our plagiarism rules. So the easiest way to think about this is what I was saying weeks ago when we're annotating. When we come across difficult language in a source, put it in your own words. I don't know what that term means. Or this sentence is very complicated. I think I know what the author is saying, but I can express it more clearly. Let's do that. Let's change the vocabulary. Let's change the sentence structure. Let's change the context in some cases. And let's also be prepared to provide commentary, evaluations, opinions of a lot of this information that we are acquiring, repackaging, and discussing. These are the ways that we make the work our own. We make the language our own, and then we also have the ability to comment, talk back to the authors that we're working with, the authors that we're citing, the authors that we're reading and responding to. So hopefully that's kind of clarifying. You guys will also notice that for every assignment that we turn in, there's a program called Turnitin that generates basically a plagiarism detection program. So it generates 2 reports for everything that you submit on Canvas. The first is just called a similarity score. And it's basically showing you how much of the text in your paper comes from online sources or is at least very similar to online sources. Don't get freaked out by the similarity score. And a lot of our future work, you might have relatively high scores, like 15, 20, 25%. that's okay as long as you're citing that stuff. If you're quoting from one of your sources, summarizing some ideas from another source, that's fine. A lot of that stuff might get flagged as being similar. But as long as you're citing it properly, as long as you're giving credit where credit's due, there's no problem. There's no violation. So we're going to work a lot more with citation rules in the weeks to come. And usually the similarity score is no big deal as long as you're citing properly, as long as you're quoting where you need to be, summarizing, paraphrasing at other times. That's okay. It's expected that everybody will have, decently high similarity scores when doing research. If it's a research paper or anything connected to a research project, of course, some of the text will be similar to online sources. We hope so, right? Because hopefully you have good sources. But then there's another report called the AI Similarity Report. You can look at both of these. As soon as you submit, these reports get generated. So you can click on these and look at these yourself before I do. The AI Similarity Report will tell you if any of your text looks the same or similar to large language models. And it's not a foolproof system, but the program's pretty good at catching obvious examples, obvious instances of plagiarism. Sometimes mistakes can occur, but there's a certain threshold that you have to hit to even get an AI similarity score. I think you have to be over like 25% or 30% AI for there to even be a score. If you're lower than 25%, they just let it slide as just sort of like, well, we can't really confirm. There might be some AI, but if it's not to that threshold, there's no report, there's no problem, and we can all move on. But once you hit 25 or 30% or more, there will be a report. You can see it, I can see it, and generally, once we're up that high, 80%, 100%, obviously it's even easier, you can see that the text has not been adapted. The text has not been created by a person. The text is coming from some other online source. And there's been no process of translation, transference. You're not putting it in your own words. You're not putting it into your own structure. And you guys have to also understand that even without these programs, it's pretty easy for instructors to tell when the language of a text doesn't really sound like a student. Everybody writes differently. Everybody has their own style, of course, but some words, some sentence structures are kind of giveaways, right? If it sounds super academic, if it sounds like a scientist or an expert wrote it, more often than not, that's because they did. And the student got it, copied it, and made no attempt to put it into their own language. So sometimes it's easy, even without looking at the Turnitin score, to recognize that you're just passing off other people's work as yours instead of taking the time to make it yours. That's a big part of what we do in here, and it is challenging. I do want to emphasize that. I don't want to be overly critical. It's hard. It's hard to take complex info and sort of transfer it into our own language, our own style, right? Our own words and sentences. That's a lot of what we're going to be learning about. That's what a lot of these skills that we're developing will help us to do. Becoming better quoters, summarizers, and paraphrasers will definitely help. But we also have to have the right spirit and the right approach, the right mindset. And we have to have a desire to really create our own original writing. Because it starts there. If you're not really willing to do that, you're going to always look for shortcuts and lean too heavily on AI. But if you recognize that original writing is still good, it's still valuable, at least for now. It might change in a few years, but for now, original work using AI sometimes to help us get there. That's the goal. So if you have any questions about that, let me know. And if you're ever struggling with an assignment, or if you're noticing that your AI score is high or your similarity score is really high and you don't know why, just email me. I'm happy to talk about it. I'm happy to walk you through some of that stuff. And there's some really simple strategies we can try just to get those scores down and get the language to be more your own. So that's all I wanted to say about that. And if you want to talk further, we always can. But now let's think more about topics. So I said I would walk you guys through some basic pre-writing or brainstorming activities. So let's do that now. And I like to focus on 3 different areas or walks of life. And I want us to try to generate some ideas in all 3 areas. A lot of what you write down over the next few minutes might not be worth keeping. That's okay. There's no penalty. But it's good to write down possibilities. And then you can return to those later and see what's promising, what you might want to pursue more. So let's start with area 1 because it's the one that most people think the most about when it comes to research topics. Let's think about our academic life. This is category 1, area 1, our academic lives. So let's just start writing about anything pertaining to our academic careers. So you can start with your major if you have one. If you haven't declared one yet, you can think about what you might like to major in. If you're looking ahead, maybe you're not even in college yet, but you should have at least some idea as to what your major will be, what you would like it to be. And if you already have one, you can obviously write about it. So what is your academic discipline? What academic field are you in? Or what field or discipline would you like to be in? Are you planning to be in? So start there and just start jotting down as much as you can about your field, your major, your academic discipline. And you could maybe start thinking about jobs that exist in that field, but where we ultimately want to get is thinking about issues or problems or controversies that might be currently taking place within that field. You might not know a whole lot about the controversy, but maybe you've heard something. Maybe you've heard people talking. Maybe you've taken a look at a headline. So you have some sense of something that's going on in that field, whether it's a hard science or healthcare or education, whatever. What's going on? Is there anything currently going on in that field? A new breakthrough? New questions that have been raised? Is there an ongoing debate or controversy or problem that people are trying to solve? Are people arguing about something? Is there some kind of policy debate going on within this field, within this discipline that you might belong to or maybe already do? So let's start there. Take a few moments to just write down anything that comes to mind about your major, your academic field, and whatever you think might be going on with that field right now. You can even look ahead. You can sort of anticipate some future developments that you think are right around the corner that are going to become important in your field very soon. So that's area 1. You can brainstorm there, and you might be able to come up with some stuff that could eventually lead you to a topic. I'm going to move on. You can always pause this or just fill in these areas later after you're finished watching the lecture. Of course, you can always pause or stop at any time. The second big area that I want us to explore will be personal interests or even hobbies. So let's think about ourselves for a little bit. Let's take a step outside of academia. Okay, let's take a step away from school and what we do in school and let's think a little bit more about what we do in our own time. What are our personal interests that we like to pursue outside of school or maybe outside of work? And again, these can be hobbies. This can really be anything that you enjoy doing. Sports, music, fishing, hunting. It really doesn't matter. Just anything that you do that you find enjoyable, and also something that you know a little bit about. Something that you're kind of well versed in. You have a base of knowledge because you do it. You're a practitioner of it. So start by just jotting some hobbies or interests down. Maybe you like to knit. Maybe you like to cook. Any of that would be fair game. So jot a few of those down and then do the same thing that we were doing for our first category. Are there any issues or controversies going on currently with some of these interests or some of these hobbies? And think hard, and it's certainly no problem to do some Googling while you're working on this, to maybe type a few questions in to ChatGPT just to kind of find out what's going on. Are people arguing about anything to do with this particular interest or topic? And just to let you know, in the past, I've had students come up with good arguments about a wide array of topics like these. Arguments about skiing, arguments about riding four-wheelers, arguments about fishing. It takes time to arrive at those arguments, but they always start with the interest. Oh, hey, this is something I like to do. Okay, great. Then they start reading. Then they start researching. Then they start figuring out what's going on. There's a controversy. People are upset. There's an unanswered question connected to this thing that I like. Maybe they had heard about it. Maybe not. Maybe this is the first time they're hearing about it. That's fine. They read more. They learn more. They start thinking about it. And they eventually arrive at a position, an argumentative stance that they can take. So it's never going to be hunting is great and here's why. It's going to be an argument about a policy or a practice or a custom or something that's going on with hunting right now, or with four-wheelers right now. Somebody just wrote a paper last year about sort of a struggle between conservationists and ATF enthusiasts, right? So you can do that kind of work. You're not going to have all the pieces in place immediately, but once you start learning more, researching more, you're going to get there. ATVs, I think. I misspoke, but you guys know what I mean. So nothing's off limits, right? Nothing is too mundane. Nothing is too personal. Well, you don't want to get too personal, perhaps, but don't think that a hobby would never make for a good topic. Sometimes it can. We don't know yet, but it's worth writing down. So just any interest, any hobby that you enjoy, and then what's going on with it. Maybe do some Googling, look around, and write down what you see or what you find out. That's our second category. Okay, and then the third category is sort of the traditional hot button issues that are going on right now that would make for pretty good topics. So these are the kinds of topics that I've listed in the document posted in the week 4 module. These are just like issues and controversies that are happening right now. Big, important matters that are being argued about, legislated in some cases, debated in a political context or maybe a judicial context, but these are things that we've probably heard about, things that people have strong opinions about, and these are often national issues. These are things that really affect everybody in the country. In some cases, maybe it's more of a worldwide issue, depending on how big the scope and your perspective might be. But these are just things that are kind of in the news, things that are being talked about publicly on a national or even international scale that we've heard about. Maybe we've read an article. Maybe we've just overheard a conversation. But we know that these are hot button, important issues right now. And you don't have to work out your own position. You don't have to know yet exactly how you feel about it or what side you land on. We have plenty of time to figure that out once we start researching. For now, just write down any of these big hot button topics that you've heard about, seen something about, or just know about from the experience of living on Earth. Even if we don't follow the news closely, we're going to hear some of this. You can also look at the list to kind of be inspired or see examples of these types of topics. So once you've done some brainstorming in all three of those categories, you're going to have a lot of stuff written down. Again, not all of it will be worth keeping, but if even some of it is, if even a fourth of what you've written down is promising, then this was a worthwhile exercise. Now I have a few questions that you can answer. Again, just put them in your notes. You're not submitting these. This is just part of brainstorming. We often call brainstorming idea generation because that's really what it is. We're simply trying to come up with ideas, original ideas of our own, and later those ideas will mesh and blend in interesting ways with the ideas that we find through research. And our own knowledge and perspective might change, it might develop and grow, and that's just how the process often goes. So just jot down some quick answers to these questions, and these might also help to lead you towards a topic. So number one, again, thinking about ourselves, which people are normally very happy to do. What are some experiences that you have had personally that might lead you to a research topic? Again, you don't have to have it all worked out yet, but has anything happened to you in your life that made you mad or maybe got you thinking a little bit more or raised interesting questions or sort of revealed a larger problem that you were not previously aware of or had not previously thought much about? Just whatever. It doesn't matter where that experience takes us. Let's just write it down because it might take us somewhere promising. So these could be positive experiences, these could be negative experiences, these could be somewhere in between. But there are things that happened to you that got you thinking, or they were meaningful to you in some way. They showed you something or made you wonder about something. So anything that comes to mind in that vein, write it down. Any experience that you had at school, at work, at home, out with your friends, online, write it down. It might lead you somewhere. So that's question one. Question two, sticking with experiences. Now, let's move outside of ourselves and let's think about experiences of people we know. Friends, family, co-workers, classmates, does not matter. But it would help if these are people that are kind of close to you so you can maybe talk to them and learn more about their experiences. But maybe you heard something. Maybe they told you something. Maybe something got passed down and you can think about what happened to them in the same way that we were thinking about our own experiences in question one. Has something happened to a friend or a family member that got you thinking? That got you curious, or maybe struck you as unjust, or good, promising, something we can do more of, something that we should do less of, something that you want to think about more and try to understand. Anything could come from anybody. Anything you've heard, anything that maybe you've read, but again, coming from a person you know, a person in your life. So just jot down anything that comes to mind there. That's number 2. And now, number 3, we've maybe already done this, but in case we haven't, this is a final chance to just kind of take inventory of everything that we've glanced at, overheard, maybe a snippet of conversation or a random headline online. Let's just jot down anything that you've read or heard lately that you might like to pursue as a topic. So a lot of people will tell me, oh, I don't read the news. That's true. A lot of people don't. But we also know that a lot of news gets delivered and sort of transmitted through social media. So even if you're not looking for news, even if you're not, your goal isn't to go and read the news, you're probably coming across stuff just over the course of your daily life. And maybe it's not something you know a whole lot about. It's not something you sought out, but you heard it, you read it. It's kind of interesting, thought-provoking, made you ask some questions. That could be something that you want to pursue. Or maybe you've heard a lot about something. Maybe you have a parent or a friend who goes on and on about a particular topic, a particular issue or controversy, and you've heard a lot about it, whether you liked it or not. Maybe that's something that you're now interested in and you want to pursue, at least in part because you know it matters to the people around you. So just anything. It can be local, it can be national, it can be global, it can be something you read online or something you simply heard people talking about. Anything like that, jot it down. That's number 3. And then finally, the 4th question, worth considering, because a lot of arguments end up being like this. Is there a problem that you would like to solve? That's the form that a lot of these arguments will eventually take. You identify an issue or a problem, something that you would like to fix or improve. And your argument basically becomes the solution to that problem. The way we can fix it, the way we can improve it, make it work better, make it work for everybody, whatever. Okay? Doesn't always end up that way, but that's how a lot of our arguments will eventually take shape. We identify a problem, we think about the problem, we come up with solutions, in part through research, but then we also come up with some ideas of our own based on what we've read, what we've learned, what we know, and our solution becomes our sort of policy proposal, and that's often what takes center stage as our original argument in our final project. So it's worth thinking about problems that you can already identify, problems that you might like to address. You don't have to know the solutions yet. Don't be discouraged if you're like, yeah, I don't know how to fix that. If you think it matters, if you think it's important, write it down. You have plenty of time to consider solutions later and to generate your own position. So these can be problems that you think are national, like they are, it's a problem facing all Americans. You can also get a lot more local. You can think about problems in the state of Nevada, if you are in the state of Nevada. I think most of us probably are. Or if you're not, whatever state you are in, are there statewide problems that you might want to address? Could there be even more local problems on the level of city or town or county? or your individual school, if it's a school other than GBC, or maybe it's a GBC problem. You can get as narrow or as broad as you want at this point. We're not married to anything yet, so consider all your options. Maybe start big with national problems and then work your way down to the county level, the state level, the city level, the town level, your neighborhood, your school, your YMCA, whatever, right? Whatever level or locality you want to look at, you can probably find potential problems, issues, things that you can address. So just jot down as many of those as you can. But again, try to only include them if these are problems that really matter to you. We can all see problems, but in order for these topics to really work, like I was saying, you need to have a stake. You need to have a personal interest in the topic. It needs to be meaningful, important to you, and maybe to the people around you, people close to you. That just makes this whole process a little bit smoother and more painless. So try to only include the problem if it's a problem that either affects you or affects people that you care about, or even if it doesn't, it's just something that you're passionate about, something that you want to address, you want to be part of the solution. So spend some time thinking about that one, write down whatever comes to mind, and now, between our initial brainstorming and our answers to those 4 questions, you should have a lot of material. It doesn't matter at this point what form that material takes. It can be incomplete sentences, abbreviations, bullet points, whatever you want, diagrams. Just get the ideas down on paper. You can do it by hand, you can type it, but just get these ideas written down so you can look back over them a little bit later and start making some choices. All right, so I'm going to kind of fast forward a little bit. So if you guys can do all of this stuff that we've been talking about early in the week, you can get some options, get some ideas generated, and then later in the week, I would like you to look back over everything that you've done and really try to pick a topic. And a lot of times we might start out with a group of 3 or 5, like we narrow it down, we eliminate all the other ones except for the best 3 or the best 5 potential topics that we've jotted down. And then once you have that smaller group, you can maybe make a final decision about which topic you want to run with. But before making that final decision, do a couple of Google searches. Again, you might want to just find out some more general info about these potential topics, see what issues and controversies are out there surrounding these topics, see how easy it might be to find sources. I mean, that does matter. It's not the only thing that matters, but it is part of your selection process. Will I be able to find good sources about this topic? Can I find reliable, in some cases, academic sources about this topic? You might want to start looking around, see what's out there, see what might be available to you. Once you've done that, once you have at least a group of 3 or 5 that you think are viable, like they could potentially work, I want you to start coming up with some research questions about those potential topics. So a research question is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a question that you have right now about a potential topic, and you hope to answer that question later through research. So we're starting very broad. So if you have, let's say in your notes, you've written down skiing and the U.S. military and, I don't know, U.S. education as 3 different areas of interest for you. You like to go skiing, you want to go into early childhood education, and maybe a parent or a spouse was in the military. This is just, I'm making this up, of course, but this sounds like it could be a real person. All right, so those are 3 things that you've written down. And you're kind of interested in all 3. You have some connections to all 3, academic connections, personal life connections, and then personal interest connection. So these are 3 topics that you are considering. Google them. See what's out there about them, but also start coming up with questions about them. So if you've written down U.S. military, try to come up with some potential research questions about the military or about people who have served in the military. Questions that you have, questions that other people have asked, questions that might be relevant right now, like, I don't know, how to assist veterans in their transition back to civilian life. That's probably not as relevant now that we're not really currently at war, but that's the type of question you could ask about that broader topic. Or if you're maybe pursuing education, early childhood education, maybe you have questions about how you measure certain learning outcomes or goals at, within that field. How do we measure progress? How do we track student progress? That might just be something that you want to learn more about, something that could get you started on a promising research track. And then with skiing, don't forget about the personal interests, because they can lead you somewhere too. Maybe you start out just by thinking, I like to ski, I go every winter, I have my favorite spots, but you can start asking questions about skiing. What types of injuries are common to skiers? What are some things we can do to prevent injury, right? That's something you could maybe make an argument about. Tracking student progress. You can make an argument about that. Assisting veterans in their transition back to civilian life. You can make an argument about that. That's ultimately our goal, right? Once we've selected a topic, we ask research questions, we move forward with research, and we eventually arrive at an argument that we can make about the topic that we've chosen. So it takes a long time. Again, don't be impatient. Don't feel like you have to have it all figured out right now. But before you choose a topic, you do want to confirm that it's at least possible to make an argument about it. And you might see that other people are making arguments about it. That's a good sign. If other people are doing it, you can probably do it too. Again, you can talk to people. Use Google, use ChatGPT, acquire info. Also lean on info that you already possess. That's why it's always good to choose something that you know at least a little bit about. Choose something that you like, because chances are you already know something, right? But there can be further questions. There's more questions that you need to find answers to. So for any potential topic that you've written down, something that you're really strongly considering, try to jot down at least a couple of research questions to go along with it, and we can start looking for answers to those questions next week. We start researching next week. All right, so let me just say a quick word about this week's research journal, and then we'll be finished. It's going to be a different assignment this week, a different type of assignment. You don't have any assigned reading for this week. You're not responding to an article or a TED Talk. Instead, you are stuck with yourself this week and your own interests, your own academic fields, and the issues and controversies that might be important to you. So for this week's research journal, we are doing what's called a knowledge inventory. This is kind of fun, and I really want you guys to sort of just let your thoughts run free. There's not a lot of rules when it comes to the knowledge inventory. This is another pre-writing, brainstorming, idea generation exercise. So You can format this however you want. You can just do 2 separate paragraphs, or you can create like 2 columns in your document, whatever you want to do, but you need 2 separate areas, okay, whether they're 2 paragraphs or 2 columns. The first one will be the things that you think and the things that you already know about any potential topic. So we're going to run through this for maybe 2 or 3 potential topics. You don't have to go all the way up to 5. Let's just do it for 2 or 3 that we're considering. 2 or 3 that might work. So start with everything you know and everything you already think about that topic. And of course, the things that you think are subject to change. The things that you know can always be corrected or altered as necessary, but just start with what you already have. So for the first column, don't Google anything. Just operate with your own mind. What do you know? What do you think? All right? And this is brainstorming, so it's kind of okay to just use bullet points. I would still like complete sentences. We should just get into the habit with any assignment that we submit. We should get into the habit of writing and complete sentences. But, it can be sort of fragmentary. It can be a little bit random. Just what do you think? What do you know? What's already in your mind about that topic? So that's column 1. And try to fill it up as much as possible for each topic that you cover. And then the second column for each topic that you cover will be, what do you still need to know? So these can take the form of questions. This will be a place to put a lot of your research questions in that second column. Just questions that you have that you haven't found the answers to yet. All right? So a lot of these will just take the form of questions. But in other cases, then they're not always going to be questions. They're just areas that you would like to learn more about, people, concepts that you would like to learn more about. They might not all be phrased as questions, but they're things to write down and remember because you're going to need to look into them further when we start researching next week. So the first column or the first paragraph, what you already know, what you already think. And then that second paragraph or that second column, things that you need to learn, things that you need to know, things that you want to read about, learn about further. Okay, so it's very informal, but just make sure you're filling up both columns or both sections with as much info as possible. And do this for at least 2 different topics that you're thinking about. You can also do 3, 2 or 3. That should give us plenty to work with. Okay, so that's what we're doing. Let me know if you have questions. And next week, we'll start talking about research. So one thing to make sure that you've done before next week rolls around, make sure you can log in to the library homepage so you can get access to our GBC library databases. We're going to be using those, but we're also going to be using some Google searches. We're going to use Google Scholar. I'm going to give you a lot of different resources next week that you'll be able to utilize when researching. But it's really important that one of the resources you use will be the library webpage through GBC, because all of those databases there, you can access them for free. Your tuition pays for those databases, so you guys might as well use them. And that's a great way to get good sources for free and to be able to access them in full text form, which means you never have to pay to be able to read the whole article. But we'll talk more about that next week. If you're having any login issues with Canvas, or more specifically, the library, email me, let me know, and we can try to troubleshoot. Okay? Let me know if you have questions, and I will see you next week.